You've probably heard this idea a million times. To beat extremist groups like ISIS, you can't just drop bombs. You have to fight their ideas. It just sounds right, doesn't it? A big online war of ideas to win over hearts and minds. And for years, that's been a cornerstone of global policy. But what if that core assumption, that whole idea, is fundamentally flawed? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. And this isn't just some random thought, right? The Brookings Institution summed up the logic perfectly. If you can just get rid of the ideology, the violence will naturally go down. It's such a simple, powerful concept. And it's been the driving force behind countless counterterrorism programs championed at the very highest levels of government all over the world. Okay, so before we dive deeper, let's make sure we're all on the same page about a key term here. When we say fighting ideas with ideas, what we're really talking about is something called a counter-narrative. Basically, it's any piece of communication, a video, a social media post, even a community event that's specifically made to challenge extremist propaganda and show people there's a better way. All right, so let's get into it. Section 1, a war of ideas. How is this strategy actually supposed to work in the real world? On the surface, the playbook seems pretty logical. Okay, so the strategy seems pretty straightforward, almost like a 4-step plan. First, you pinpoint the toxic ideologies. Then, you find authentic voices, people from the community, young leaders, even former extremists, to create the counter-messages. Step 3, you blast these messages out online to reach anyone who might be tempted. And finally, step 4, the extremist group's appeal starts to fade. It looks so clean on paper, right? And believe me, this isn't just some theory sitting in a binder somewhere. We are talking about massive, well-funded global campaigns. In France, the government launched the hashtag #StopViolentJihadisme campaign, complete with these intense shock videos showing the brutal reality of joining a group like ISIS. And in the US, the government even partnered up with Facebook for something called the peer-to-peer program, getting college students to build their own online campaigns against extremism. This approach is absolutely everywhere. So, okay, big campaigns, lots of money, seems logical. But the big question, the million-dollar question is, does any of it actually work? Well, the evidence is in, and honestly, it tells a very, very different story. Let's start with the most basic, almost obvious problem. All these expensive, professionally made counter-narratives, are they even being seen by the people they're designed for? The individuals who are actually on the brink of radicalizing. I mean, this really hits the nail on the head. It's a huge logistical problem. As Brookings points out, you can have the most brilliant, persuasive message in the world, but how do you get it in front of the right eyeballs? People who are vulnerable to this stuff aren't exactly Googling government-sponsored content on why I shouldn't be an extremist. But okay, let's go even deeper. Let's question the entire foundation this is built on. The whole strategy assumes that extremist propaganda is what causes people to become violent. That if you watch enough ISIS videos, you're just gonna snap and do something terrible. But is that really how it works? And this is such a critical point. The research is pretty clear. Online propaganda isn't some kind of magic switch that flips someone into a terrorist. It's more like an enabler. It's gasoline poured on a fire that's already smoldering. Think about it. Radicalization usually starts with real-world problems. Injustice, a lack of opportunity, a search for identity. The propaganda just comes in later and gives a name and a flag to all those feelings that were already there. And look, this isn't just one person's opinion. We're talking about a major study from the European Parliament that came to a pretty brutal conclusion. They said the whole concept of counter-narratives is, and I'm quoting here, rather underdeveloped and lacks a thorough grounding in empirical research. Ouch. Basically, it's built on sand. Okay, hold on. Let's recap. The messages aren't reaching the right people. They're based on a shaky premise about what causes violence in the first place, and major studies say the evidence just isn't there. So, why? Why do governments keep pouring billions of dollars into these programs? What is going on? And the answer, when you dig into it, is because it's convenient. It's the politically easy solution. It is so much easier to focus a campaign on their twisted ideas than it is to look in the mirror and confront the hard reality of social and political problems. Sometimes problems our own governments are part of. It neatly keeps the blame over there and avoids any uncomfortable self-reflection. I mean, just think about it from a politician's perspective. A social media campaign, that's a nice, neat project you can point to. You can count the views, the likes, the shares, even if those numbers don't actually mean anything for reducing violence. Most importantly, it completely avoids any messy questions about your own government's foreign policy or human rights record. It lets you stand up and say, see, we're doing something. And that's the real danger here. It all comes down to this. We end up spending all our time and money treating the symptoms, the propaganda videos, the angry tweets, while the actual disease, the root causes that make people angry and vulnerable in the first place, just keeps getting worse. All right, so if the old way is broken, what's the new way? What does a better approach even look like? And no, it doesn't mean we just throw our hands up and stop trying to communicate. Not at all. The really good news here is that we're getting smarter about this stuff. The research is getting way better, and people on the ground, practitioners, community leaders, they know more and more about what can actually make a difference. So a really effective strategy. It doesn't ditch communication. It just weaves it into something much, much bigger and more holistic. It's about combining those compelling, peaceful messages with tangible, real-world support. Things like one-on-one mentoring, mental health care, programs that build critical thinking skills. And, this is the big one, it means actually rolling up our sleeves and addressing the tough socioeconomic and political problems that create these grievances. But, and this is a big but, that leads us straight to the bad news. The single biggest roadblock. We may know more about what works, but the political will for governments to actually change their own behavior that research often shows is a key driver of extremism, that will is still incredibly low. So why is that political will so darn low? Well, it gets complicated. The problem is that the very governments whose actions might be fueling extremism are often seen as vital security partners. So as the source material puts it, as long as keeping that security partnership is the #1 priority, there's just not much incentive to push for the kind of deep, difficult changes that are really needed. And so that leaves us right here with this really challenging question. Fighting bad ideas with good ideas is the easy, visible, and politically safe thing to do. It looks like you're fighting extremism, but if we're actually serious about reducing the threat for real, are we willing to do the hard, messy, and politically inconvenient work of treating the disease and not just the symptoms? That's the real question.